Hello everyone, Max here with Fiction Rant to bring you another reaction video, this time to Generation Tech's Galactic Empire vs. Borg video series. I'll just be covering part 2 in this video. Basically, I've seen some Generation Tech stuff. They generally have great information and are fun storytellers, but I often find myself disagreeing with their conclusions, so here we are. Also, I have links into my Ko-fi account and Fourth Wall merch store in the description if you're interested in supporting the channel or just want a cool t-shirt or mug. Before we get started, though, I do want to be clear. I am not here to call anyone stupid or anything like that. I'm here to keep the conversation going on this kind of thing and to give my own 2 cents on how certain matchups would have gone based on the evidence provided and my own knowledge. So with that, we'll get started. Galactic Empire vs. Borg, according to Generation Tech, Part 2. This will be where they actually give their conclusions on things. So last time... Oh, he'll give his own recap. I'll let him do it.
Hey friends, welcome to Generation Tech, and this is the second part of the Galactic Empire versus the Borg. A fleet of 5,000 Star Destroyers and the Death Star have engaged a 6,000 strong fleet of Borg cubes.
He's kind of pulling the numbers out of nowhere on this. We've never seen that kind of fleet from the Empire. We have seen it during the Clone Wars, so it's not totally unreasonable that they would assemble that much. If you saw part 1, you'll know that the only source for assembling that many cubes in a single attack is from a novelization, so massive grain of salt there. All that said, really interesting for the sake of actually getting into the comparison, so we'll go for it.
After an initial victory, destroying a Borg space complex with the Death Star's superweapon, the Borg are now on the counterattack, and the Imperial fleet is overwhelmed. The Death Star still hasn't recharged for another shot, and Star Destroyers are getting destroyed. A Borg away team beam directly onto the bridge of Vader's Executor Super Star Destroyer and start assimilating the crew before Vader's eyes.
Important thing that I pointed out in the first part, the Borg would not just transport to the bridge. They pointed out in the first part that there's like 190,000 drones on every cube. They'd basically just send them to everywhere. Yes, there would be some on the bridge, but that's not the only part they would take. They would take engineering, they would take all the Imperial garrison stuff, they'd assimilate everything.
Vader, for the first time since becoming a Sith Lord, starts to feel just a little bit of fear.
Nah, he's terrified of Palpatine, but whatever. For the sake of this, whatever.
And you know what fear leads to?
Fear leads to anger. Anger leads to hate. Hate leads to suffering.
Anyone else miss the
suffering of hundreds of Borg drones. Vader knows what he has to do. Vader rampages through the ship, taking out Borg drones with a viciousness that eclipses all of his previous mass killings. The Sand People, the Younglings, the Separatist Council, the Rebels. Borg drones are decapitated with their heads bouncing along the floor, being kicked around like footballs. Their technology-infused bodies are crushed by Vader's force power and flung up into the air. The Borg are completely unable to adapt to Vader's lightsaber and his use of the Force.
So I call some BS on that. Use of the Force, yeah, it would be very, very difficult to actually do anything about that because he's just delivering kinetic energy directly. Sure, they could make, uber reinforced drones, but that would just require a ton of extra armor. They could do it, but it would take extra resources, and all they would do is really just become resistant to force powers, not immune. The lightsaber, on the other hand, that's just a plasma weapon, and we see Borg adapting to all sorts of energy weapons, and he's already talked about them adapting to blaster fire, and all that a lightsaber really is just, well, it's better than this, but it's basically a blaster bolt that you're kind of suspending off the end of a sword, and you get to, do stuff with it. It's more powerful than a blaster bolt, but whatever. In any case, yeah, Borg would absolutely adapt to a lightsaber fairly quickly.
As Vader rampages through the ship, the crew work to close any gaps in the shielding and modulate shield frequencies so no more Borg drones can beam aboard.
So I mentioned this in the first part, the whole remodulating shield frequencies and stuff. The Borg wouldn't be able to... Well, for the sake of comparison, it's best to assume that all shields can block Borg transporters. So really what would have to happen is multiple cubes would have to lock on tractor beams and drain the shields of the Executor. Then they could beam aboard. Can't really be like, oh yeah, we beamed aboard, then they raise shields, because that's just kind of a ridiculous assumption to make. So this whole remodulating shields, no. If they're aboard, that means the shields are already down, and shield control is one of the first places the Borg would transport to so they don't come back up.
However, there are already 1,000 Borg on the ship. Vader has his work cut out for him.
So the Executor is like 3 times as long as a Borg cube is wide, and each cube carries over 100,000 Borg. There's no way there would just be 1,000 on there. There would be tens of thousands of Borg. And he said that there's 7,000 cubes available, and in that first strike by the Death Star, they took out like 50, along with whatever structure the Borg are building in this scenario. There's plenty of drones to go around to assimilate the single largest vessel in the fleet, aside from the Death Star. They go just nuts with it.
On the bridge of the Death Star, Tarkin starts feeling a little hot. He asks for an environmental report, and crew members tell him that the bridge has increased in temperature by a few degrees, but the bottom 50 decks of the Death Star are now at 39.1 degrees Celsius, or 102 degrees Fahrenheit, and 90% humidity.
Okay, so clearly he's doing a callback to First Contact, where this exact scenario happened to the Enterprise after blowing up a Borg sphere. They weren't able to get their shields up, and their sensors weren't working all that great after doing the time jump, so the Queen and a bunch of drones were able to beam aboard. Again, that was like an emergency beam out situation, and they were being sneaky. There are 7,000 cubes involved in this. They would distribute themselves freaking everywhere, and containing them would be literally impossible. And they'd be able to do that to every single Star Destroyer in that 4,000 strong fleet. The numbers on a Star Destroyer, including all the crew and the garrison, they're still outnumbered multiple times to 1 by each cube. And there's more cubes than there are Imperial ships. They would just be inundated by, as soon as their shields drop, they'd be inundated by drones. That said, it's unclear whether or not the first Death Star was actually shielded. They did have a magnetic shield, but that's mainly a retaining atmosphere thing for like around hangars. They don't really provide any protection. It's like a navigational shield thing. You don't actually drop those ever to tie it into Star Trek. So, I don't know. They're telling a story here. I see what they're doing, but at the same time, it's just kind of baffling that they're going this route with it, because like they gave the Borg a massive numbers advantage and they're proceeding to not use it.
He knows something has happened, and there's only one possible explanation. The Borg must have beamed aboard and started assimilating the station. Tarkin orders access to all tactical systems to be restricted to the bridge, which is located just above the super laser dish. He then orders several thousand stormtroopers to go down to the lower 50 decks and engage the Borg, who still have about 200 decks to climb before they can reach the bridge.
Again, no they wouldn't. They would just beam directly to freaking everywhere. Also, to shut down the super laser, you don't need to disable the entire station. Like, if you look, I don't know if you can see my cursor all that well. Here's the reactor, here's the big laser, that's the super laser, here's the bridge. All this other stuff is super important for running that, and if you disable any of it, chances are the super laser will go offline pretty quickly. The whole station is built around just making the super laser work, so you don't have to do that much damage internally and messing with systems to make the super laser just not work anymore.
You see, when the Borg detected the super laser charging up to take out their space complex, they managed to match the Death Star's shield frequencies and transport about 50,000 drones, the Borg Queen, and some equipment aboard the space station.
Okay. Again, why would they all beam to the same location? That's kind of ridiculous. The Borg Queen getting transported, though, if they brought one along for this incursion, which they probably have to do because she would help, they'd be so far removed from the Borg nexuses and all that kind of stuff by being in the Star Wars galaxy that, yeah, bringing along a Queen would probably be a good idea. That said, First Contact taking out the Queen was a big deal because there just weren't that many Borg available and they didn't have a lot of infrastructure. If you have the 7,000 cubes that he's talking about, they wouldn't have a single point of failure like that. They're not stupid.
They've already accessed the computer system and downloaded the owner's manual, so they know they have to get to the bridge to take control of the super laser. They're assimilating the station at a rate of about 1 deck a minute. Meanwhile, aboard the Executor, Vader is taking a break from the killing when he receives a distress call from the Death Star. They are evacuating all non-essential personnel, and the Executor is expected to receive shuttlecraft. Vader knows he has to make his ship safe, so he resumes hunting down the remaining Borg drones.
Again, that would be an absolutely insurmountable number of them. We also don't get to see Borg really using ranged weapons in the show much. They do a lot of walking up and assimilating. That doesn't mean they don't have them. It just means that we haven't seen them use them much. Remember that most of the time we see the Borg, it's either somebody has boarded their ship and they only start actually trying to do anything about it after whoever has boarded them is doing something pesky. That doesn't mean that's all the Borg can do. They assimilate plenty of ranged weapons. Ranged weapons have inherent advantages. We just don't see it on screen much because the circumstances don't allow it. Star Trek Online, I'm not going to use that as an actual reference, but they do in fact use ranged weapons in Star Trek Online. There's other sources that we can point to that, the Borg have ranged weapons, and you get enough of those together, and they can shoot Vader, and he cannot block everything. He can block some. He can absolutely block phasers, because blocking things is not a reflexes thing, it's a precognition thing. He can see the shots before they happen, so he can absolutely intercept them. He cannot, however, as Ki-Adi-Mundi learned during Order 66, he cannot block 80 of them at once. Just not possible. All right.
Meanwhile, the Executive's crew inform the Death Star how to modulate shield frequencies to stop the Borg beaming aboard.
Again, non-issue. If they don't have shields up, Borg can't beam over. The whole beaming through the shield modulation stuff. First off, Wars has never demonstrated the ability to modulate shields at all, so if the Borg manage to penetrate them, that's pretty much game over. Also, Borg very rarely actually manage to pull that off, so unless all of them are operating according to the exact same shield frequency that first Star Destroyer that they sampled was utilizing, during a battle situation, they would not immediately be able to just ignore shields.
The Death Star, the Borg are now advancing at a faster rate, about 1 deck every 30 seconds. They'll be at the bridge within an hour. Tarkin starts to feel that he is losing the battle, his beloved Death Star overrun by a superior enemy. He starts thinking back to his childhood on the planet of Eriadu, and his combat training against wild predators on the Carrion Plateau. There was one time where he lured several wild beasts into a clearing in a forest by laying meat on the ground. When a sufficient number of beasts had entered the clearing, he detonated several charges buried just below the grass. With the majority of the herd destroyed, any beasts on the periphery ran in terror. Tarkin hesitantly tells his commanders to allow the shield generators in the lower hemisphere of the Death Star to fluctuate, leaving openings in the shielding where the Borg can beam in. Thinking it's a technical malfunction, the Borg take the bait.
Okay. He already said that however many tens of thousands of Borg beamed aboard. Let me look real quick at the crew complement of the Death Star. About 1.2 million personnel. So if they have assimilated approximately 30 to 40% of the Death Star, I forget what he said, they have hundreds of thousands of drones aboard. They're not dedicating anymore. It's going fine. Also, again, those would be distributed across the entire Death Star. So instead of just advancing in one direction, they'd be advancing from all directions toward all directions.
And hundreds of Borg cubes start to converge on the Death Star's position. Now Tarkin realizes that the superweapon has recharged, but it's no good against small, scattered targets. He takes a shot anyway and destroys a couple of Borg cubes that just happen to be in the path of the beam.
Yeah, that's fair.
But it's more of a demonstration to let the Borg know the weapon is still active and they should come and claim their prize.
Again,
by now,
probably not
about
active by now.
2,000 Borg ships have surrounded the station, and 300,000 Borg drones have beamed aboard. Crew members are fighting to escape before the shuttle bays in the central trench are overrun by Borg. Vader sees what is happening, and although Tarkin hasn't broadcast his plan to the fleet to avoid interception of the signal by the Borg, Vader can feel a massive amount of anxiety coming from the Death Star. Tarkin and his crew are afraid of what they are about to do. Vader knows a massive explosion is coming and orders all ships in the fleet that still have working hyperdrive to jump to a distance of at least 5 light years away. Tarkin sees the fleet leave on the main viewer and without thinking orders the crew to begin a 20-second countdown to self-destruct. In the depths of the Death Star, the Borg Queen realizes what is happening and utters some not too unfamiliar words.
It's a trap!
Obviously in a...
Yeah, so if you look back at the diagram that he already showed, if they have taken that much of the Death Star, you can't self-destruct at that point. You don't have that much control.
Slightly more feminine voice than that. There's now only 10 seconds left, and a warning of impending doom travels through the Borg's collective consciousness. A few dozen ships furthest away from the Death Star manage to go to warp, but for the majority, it's too late. The countdown reaches 0, and... the Death Star's hypermatter reactor explodes, ripping apart the station in a massive explosion and taking 2,000 Borg cubes with it.
Okay, so a bunch of X-Wings and the Millennium Falcon, none of which are particularly well defended, managed to survive the Death Star explosion that they knew was happening and got away in time, but gigantic Borg cubes that can take on the combined military might of an entire fleet of Federation ships, those can't get away fast enough and get blown up by the explosion. Also, they were engaging the Empire fleet close enough for that to actually work. I don't buy it.
The Borg cubes on the periphery are caught in the shockwave, and many are disabled and start drifting in space. With the Borg Queen dead, the collective consciousness is severed, and the remaining operational cubes go to transwarp. As Imperial reinforcements arrive, they start a cleanup operation.
Okay, regarding the whole Queen being taken out, so therefore their collective is taken out. Yes and no. It would disrupt them, but the only reason why that was so thoroughly destructive on the Enterprise during First Contact was because she was their only source of connection to the collective. They did the whole trying to convert the deflector dish into a transmitter so they could contact the existing Borg thing. They did that specifically as a way to be able to communicate with the Borg and other parts of the galaxy, maybe assimilate Earth in an earlier timeline, all that kind of stuff. That'd be great. That doesn't mean that the Queen is the only way. What that means is that the Queen is not their only link up to the collective. Every single cube is connected to the collective. If one Queen is taken out, she'll be replaced, first of all. Granted, I think this video came out in 8 years ago, so Picard hadn't come out yet. But in that show, you get to see a demonstration of 7 of 9 becoming a new Queen. Sorry, spoilers. At least temporarily, and she's able to, control a small collection of Borg for a while. All that to say, taking out the Queen, yes, it would be bad for the Borg. It would not shut them down. It's not like the droid control ship kind of a thing for them if they have a bunch of cubes available. Those are fairly independent.
Destroying disabled cubes drifting in space. The hardest part of the operation is clearing out the forest moon of Endor that's infested with Borg Ewoks. Many stormtrooper lives were lost. In the end, the Emperor orders the construction of a second Death Star to completely destroy planets whose populations had been assimilated, such as Naboo. See ya, Jar Jar. The confrontation ends in victory for the Empire, but at great cost. The death of Grand Moff Tarkin, the destruction of their brand new superweapon, and over 1,000 Star Destroyers, either destroyed or disabled beyond repair.
Okay, so he started with 7,000 cubes that are all immune to Imperial weaponry against a bunch of Star Destroyers. He then blew up 2,000 of those cubes in the explosion around the Death Star for reasons, and then the rest just forgot? Come on, man.
Oh, and rebel scum choose to take advantage of the situation and destroy a few Imperial outposts while the fleet was distracted. So guys, what do you think about how this played out? Do you think the Empire could really defeat the Borg? Leave your comments below. There was a cool video out a few weeks ago by Eckhart's Ladder, the Death Star versus the Borg Cube, which gave me inspiration to make this series. I'll put it on screen in just a moment. Do go check it out. If you like it, leave him a comment. Let him know Generation Tech sent you there. As always, if you're new, please subscribe to our channel. Give this video a like. And if you're watching this, you are Generation Tech.
No, I'm actually fiction. So there. Okay, so there you have it. Generation Tech, he believes that the only way that I can really see this actually working out the way that he said is essentially if the Borg just shut off their brains. Like he already set it up that the Imperial weapons don't work on the cubes anymore because they learned about the tech. So you have 7,000 invulnerable cubes to all Imperial weaponry, except for the super laser, which I agree, they would not be able to adapt to the super laser without assimilating it first. They then proceed to choose the most baffling tactics during this to try to do anything. We're going to just beam to the bridge of the Executor. Why? We're going to just beam to the lowermost decks, the farthest away from the super weapon that we're scared of as physically possible. Because why? I have no idea. The range of Federation transporters is like 50,000 kilometers. They'd absolutely be able to beam to basically anywhere in the station if they can actually penetrate the shields, which, again, the Death Star's shields are just magnetic shields. I don't think they would block transporters anyway. They don't have deflector shields on the Death Star. They don't have ray shields. So, yeah, that's what I mean. When I started this intro, I said that, he has really good information and he has a fun story, but then he just comes up with conclusions that are, what? So, yeah, there's my take on it. Respect the heck out of Generation Tech for the research that he did. He even talked about like the Moff Tarkin story of him trapping a bunch of animals and blowing them up. I'd never actually known that story, so that's pretty cool that he did that digging. The 7,000 cubes or whatever it was invading the Alpha Quadrant. I hadn't read that story either, so it's really cool to see the amount of research that he does. But I think it's pretty clear he really wanted the Empire to win this and just kind of fudged things. So, sorry, bud, but come on. You stacked the deck entirely in one direction and then just kind of MacGuffined your way out. I don't know. Maybe he did one later on that was a little more fair. Anyway, that's all I've got for this one. Thanks so much for watching. Again, I have a Ko-fi link and a Fourth Wall link in the description if you want to support the channel. Let me know if you like this kind of content and want to see more. I am so interested in checking out Eckhart's Ladder on the Death Star versus a Borg cube because I think that sounds super interesting. And until next time, live long and prosper, and may the Force be with you.